Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Dr. Coco's Mnemonics. Today I'm going to be going over some more biostatistics concepts that I've come up with. This has been like the number one thing that people have recommended, as they really need help with biostatistics. And I understand why, because I think that First Aid didn't do a great job of explaining a lot of these concepts that keep showing up on MBMEs and STEP. And one of them that I've definitely gotten lots of questions on, even on test day, is this statistically significant? And if I give you this blah 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 number and this blah 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 number, can you tell me if it's significant or not? And I'm like, oh, why do I care? I want to be a doctor. But either way, we're gonna learn it. First off, you have to really know this 4x4 table, and there's been a lot of videos on YouTube going over this 4x4 table that I think are really good. So just knowing, that A, B, C, and D boxes, knowing that your false positives will be your type 1 error or alpha, and your false negatives will be your beta or type 2 error. And honestly, on every single test, I draw this table out, diseases, plus or minus, test, plus or minus, and when they ask me like, oh, is it, we're trying to do sensitivity or specificity, positive predictive or negative predictive values, and then I draw all these arrows. And I remember like sensitivity will be true positives divided by all of your positive diseases. Specificity is true negatives over all of the negative diseases, so it would be true negative plus false positives. And then positive predictive value will be all of the true positives divided by all of the positives. And negative predictive value will be the true negatives divided by all of the negatives. So if you can remember this will help you do the majority of questions that you get as far as biostatistics concepts. But how do I know if something is statistically significant or not? And they'll usually give you a confidence interval, and you look at that and you say, does this confidence interval include 1? Because if it does, it's not significant. You do not want it to include 1. So if you have a confidence interval that is 1.5 to 2, that's good. We like that. But if your confidence interval is like 0.5 to 1.5, that includes 1, and we don't like that. For whatever reason, we don't like the number 1, and we don't want to include it in our confidence interval. Next is the p-value. The confidence interval and p-value are the ones they usually give to help you determine if it's significant or not. And the p-value is just the probability that something was due to chance. So when you're looking at p-value, it also correlates with the alpha or the type 1 error that I went over in the 4x4 table. And so if you looking at your p-value, you want it to be under 0.05. Sometimes they'll give you that number, sometimes they'll give you a different number, but if they don't give it, you assume 0.05, and you want it to be under that. And the way I think of it is, the lower the p or your penis, the more confident you are, because that means like if it's lower to the ground, it's bigger, right? Don't think of it that way as it being bigger. Think of it as lower to the ground though, because you want it to be under this 0.05 number. So the lower your penis, the more confident you are. And you only have 1 penis, so that helps you remember type 1 error, because if you had 2 penises, that'd be like really weird, right? Okay. So p-value is under 0.05, confidence interval does not include 1. And knowing that your p-value also correlates with your type 1 error. And then your power is 1 minus beta, so this doesn't help you with statistical significance. But this is something I think every NBME, pretty much the new ones, have given a question about this formula. And your beta is the type 2 error from that 4x4 table. And power is pretty much telling you like you didn't observe an effect when there was one, and that makes sense because the type 2 error or the beta was saying we have the disease but you didn't pick it up, right? And I also kind of think of it as like beta boobs. So if you have big boobs, it has an inverse effect on power. Kind of like If you have really big boobs, maybe you're not going to get hired for a job like you would if you were a man. Okay, so it has the inverse effect on power. This right here I drew out is the standard deviation table. So I've had so many questions on this where they ask, oh, we're in one standard deviation. What is the percentage of that? And that's 68%. You're under 2 standard deviations. That's 95% or 1.96 of the mean. I've had it asked both ways. And then if you're in 3 standard deviations, that's 99.7% or 2.58 of the mean. So I've had it both ways for that as well. And sometimes they'll say, oh, we're at this number right here, calculate the range of 1 standard deviation or 2 standard deviations. And so you really have to memorize these numbers. And I wish that I had a better way of memorizing it other than saying like 68, 95, 99. Unfortunately, that's when you might just have to memorize numbers for. But usually, if you can, memorize these couple of numbers, you can get questions really fast on STEP. This next concept is someone asked about specifically on Reddit, and it's the intention to treat. And I've had a lot of questions on this one too. This one has definitely shown up at least 2 or 3 times on MBMEs. So say you have 2 groups, one experimental and one's not, and I just gave it an amount. So say you have one group of 100 that's getting a drug and one group of 100 that's not getting a drug. They're getting a placebo. And then 25 people from the experimental group just don't listen to you and they don't take the drug. Okay? So what do you do? I mean, how do you list that? Is that 100 people that you treated or 75 people that you treated? Because 25 people literally didn't listen to you, right? And they said, fuck you, doctor, I'm not taking this drug. Well, with intention to treat, you had the intention to treat 100 people, right? So even though 25 people said, screw you, I'm not taking it, you still include those 100 people as your experimental group. And that might seem counterintuitive, and I definitely got this question wrong the first time I got it on an MBME because I've never learned it. But if you think about real life and you're a doctor and you prescribe somebody metformin or something, what are the odds that that person's going to take that drug? And should that skew your data? Well, it should skew your data because you want those people in that group, right? Because there's so many people who will say, oh, well, I feel fine, this doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. He says I have diabetes and I don't. And if you don't include people like that in your data, you're not going to get an accurate representation of the population, right? And so when you're looking at an intention to treat, you always go with your original group because that was your original intention. Whether it, however many numbers they give, keep the numbers the same. Very high yield, and definitely something I did not learn before MBME. I hope this helps you. If there's any more biostatistics or any other topics that anybody wants me to go over, just comment in the comment section and like and follow.